I will switch to the presentation mode. So the talk today I will give is on nature-based solutions to protect and restore lake ecosystems, and this in relation to improve and guarantee their services in the context of sustainable development. So what will we cover during this class? So it will be about the protection and restoration of lake ecosystems. And well, first we will think about how obvious is this, what are some common and uncommon perspectives related to these ecosystems, how this is related to economies and markets, in particular then for fish species, we will have a look at that. And then we will make a link with sustainable development and how nature-based insights and nature-based solutions can play a role in this process. Ecosystems are very important. If we look simply at fish markets and the related economics, we see that about 40 million people worldwide are involved in fisheries, and that 17% of the animal protein consumed is actually originating from fish. So FAO in this way indicates how crucial fisheries and fish are for human beings. Nevertheless, we see worldwide systematic global declines in fish stocks as a result of overharvesting, pollution, climate change, and habitat destruction. Strikingly, the destruction of habitats is linked to activities like also aquaculture and the fishing itself. So the solutions are also in that line to restore them. So destruction of lake ecosystems is actually worldwide a very common problem. It's not something linked to only oceans or to rivers, but also lakes are deteriorated in many places. I give an example very nearby from Flanders, from Belgium, where I'm living, and also from a lake that we are investigating during about 5 years in Ethiopia and Africa, where you have very extreme conditions ongoing currently. We start at home. So in Belgium, here you see two large lakes. It are artificial lakes at the end of a river basin that are constructed to store our reserves for drinking water. So these lakes are fed by the streams in the vicinity, and they are actually then used as a source for the drinking water production of a relatively large area in Flanders. Now, strikingly, still about 40% of the water that is entering these lakes has not been treated by a wastewater treatment facility. So we are still discharging systematically wastewater in these streams that are used to feed our lakes for drinking water production. So this leads to enormous challenges to keep these lakes in a good condition, but also to make proper drinking water from it. So it asks a lot of technological activities and equipment to get all the pollutants out to warrant a good water quality. A side effect of this storage of this water in these lakes is that these streams are not bringing the water to the main stream anymore, which is a Scheldt, and the channel Genterneus, which is a link between the Scheldt and the harbor of Ghent. As a result of this, more and more salt water is also intruding in the channel, and now we have already enormous problems to meet standards that have been set up for these systems. And it means that, like, for instance, close to Ghent, we have already marine fish in what should be challenges. There are nevertheless few examples in Flanders of good water quality. This is another lake, a smaller lake, that is originating from mining activities in the past. So we have been mining some cobbles in our area for construction works. And actually some of these ponds, some of these lakes are in a very good condition, have a very clear water among others. But these are unfortunately the exceptions in our area. I move now to Africa, where we have very extreme conditions. There's the northern part of Ethiopia, where you have Lake Tana as one of these large lakes, one of these large African lakes. It's as big as actually the whole province of Eastern Flanders, so about 1/10 of Belgium. So it's a huge lake. So it has been used for many years for fishing, for food production. But in the last years, actually, these fish stocks have been declined tremendously, as has been shown by Dr. Shuit Hibrimedin in his PhD and also some related publications. So one of the reasons is the overfishing, the overharvesting, but also the fact that no way the treatment is lead to serious bringing both sediments and pollutants to the lake. So the high sediment concentration is also leading to a decline in the efficiency of solar radiation entering the lake. And actually the primary production is already hampered simply by sediments that are entering the system, and the pollutants adhere to it strengthen this. Also the fact that they removed at many areas the wetlands and the side of the lake has led to serious impacts on the ecosystems. This has often to do with agricultural activities, but also with the harvesting of papyrus that have several functions for instance, roofs, but also for baskets, for instance. So there's an extreme condition. We have been reporting about this about 5 years ago. So this has a kind of introduction on the need for protecting and restoring lakes worldwide. In the next origin, and also how we can actually counter this in the future, mainly from the side of making use of nature-based insights and solutions. So like mentioned in the examples, there are many pollutants entering surface waters. It can be via streams entering also lake ecosystems, and this has an effect on the services and products for consumers. So a very clear example is, for instance, the harvesting of water, but also the food production from lakes, like from fisheries. So many functions are affected by these activities, and the feedbacks are usually going in a downward trend. So you need some mechanisms to counter this. So in Europe, we have the DeepSeer concept that we apply for this. So it is actually the abbreviation of drivers, pressures, state, and impacts combined with the needed responses to counter these elements. So you can counter degradation of of lakes via diverse actions. And of course, the earlier you do this in the system, for instance, if you can work at the level of the drivers, so the change in the society, this will be much more efficient than actually when you have to restore things once you have actually a very severe impact, when people become ill because of drinking contaminated water, or whether they have no food available because of lack of fish in the lake. So the earlier you start with your response in this chain, the better it is. So to give an example here, this is here at the driver's part, that you have a shift towards urbanization. More and more people make use of the areas next to lakes to live there, but also in association with it, often that there is an increased agricultural activity, industrialization. People start also to change their hygienic standards, so they wash themselves more. In this way, they produce also more wastewater, and they consume more drinking water. So this leads more and more to pressures on these lakes in particular. So because of wastewater that is discharged to these surface waters, more land is used, and we see more and more land being converted from forested areas to agricultural land. And more pesticides are used. Manure is increasing and being directly or indirectly entering these systems. And you get often a higher withdrawal of water and also fish and plants from these systems. So there's in many cases it's leading to a status change. So we are already at the third level then in this DeepSeer concept, in this DeepSeer chain. We will actually then see, as a result of this, gradual changes in water quality conditions. So, for instance, increase in organic matter. There are more harmful bacteria in the system, less oxygen in the system, a lower biodiversity. Nutrients are increasing. You get shift in algae blooms, more severe algae blooms, also toxic algae blooms that start to develop. As a result of this, you get a change toward also habitats that are destroyed. For instance, the underwater vegetation is removed. So you always get also changes in dynamics as a result of this. And this is then in the end also leading to impacts to human society then, where you have less drinking water available, that you have to do more efforts, that you have more expensive wastewater treatment and drinking treatment needed to meet the standards of the health, to guarantee the health of people. So this is becoming more and more expensive. Nevertheless, we see that it's very hard in this early stage to convince people to protect the lakes and their surfaces. So we see that often there's a tendency to only act once there's serious impacts, when people start to die as a result of pollution, and then people want to invest. So that's unfortunate. So the preventive measures are very hard to implement. So there have been developed some ways to make an assessment of these systems, often based on ecosystem conditions. So what they call then bioindicators or ecological assessment. So this has led to some change. In Europe, we have chosen specifically for the Water Framework Directive that is based on some communities, like among others fish, that is allowing us to assess these communities and to see if some actions, like for instance wastewater treatment installment, like habitat restoration, is in the end leading to some benefit for the ecosystems and their related services. So what we have seen here, this directive has been implemented, is a very gradual change, a gradual improvement in our surface water. So one of the bases you see here, the Flanders, so the Flemish area, you see here this small base, which is one of our living labs of our laboratory, where we have many PhDs already on, that you see a very gradual increase, for instance, in the fish community over time. So it really takes a lot of investment and time to see the results of these actions. So nature conservation and ecological assessment, they are useful, but to a very limited extent. And the main reason is that all kinds of other mechanisms like environmental impact assessment are more paying attention to social economic activities and overrule these environmental and these ecological concerns, even till today. Also in environmental regulation, we often lack law enforcement, and we see that many backdoor practices are still leading to that companies have licenses, leading to the further deterioration of ecosystems. We see also from a political side, because of voters have also limited interest in nature, that there's a limited political willingness also to avoid degradation and to give priority to it. Only when there are serious accidents, like we had recently with a particular compound, that then politicians are willing to move forward with regulations. So, but often we need accidents to convince people and convince voters and politicians in particular. Also, several NGOs like Greenpeace, they tried lobbying and trying to make things further implemented, but this has had also a limited action. So we make some improvement in Europe, I think, but there's still so much more to do. So one of the main reasons is that the drinking water, but also the, like for instance, ecosystem components like fish, do not seem to have enough weight in the economics in the markets. So there have been some actions taken to compensate for this. So on one hand is the stock assessment, like we have also via FAO implemented worldwide, and what we also use in Europe, for instance. And you see in some cases, like you see here in Northeast Atlantic area, where actually the fish that are overfished, or the stock that are overfished, are declining, and we see actually very positive evolution. Nevertheless, you see here in Mediterranean area, Black Sea, that still many fish stocks are overfished. Although we have this legislation, although we have these actions that can be taken, that it really takes a lot of time before it's really changing something. And I think the case in Lake Tana in Ethiopia is a very good example on where it is still even going downwards in a very severe manner. So these quota regulations are one element. Also aquaculture. I think the next speaker, Gilbert, will talk about aquaculture and as a solution. So we see that actually, because of the growing need, that actually aquaculture can for sure compensate for this to a high extent. So this is very good news. Nevertheless, we see also new challenges related to impacts of aquaculture. There is a terrestrial food or terrestrial feed, actually in this case, added to these systems. This ends also as a burden to the water quality, and also antibiotics and other compounds are more and more used to control and to guarantee the production of aquaculture. This is also leading then to new challenges. So it can be positive to compensate for the growing needs, but in the meantime also it leads to new burdens to lakes, among others. So what we see that you need not only in the lake action, but you need actually action at the whole nutritional and food approach in society, where it's the agricultural production also on land, and what people eat and want to consume, and how you influence this. This is actually what we need as an integrated approach in the future. So actions in the lake itself, like we will see later, these nature-based solutions will be very critical, will be important, but also visions in the society, both of consumers but also of politicians, are crucial in the end to solve these problems. And in that respect, ecosystem services, ecosystem valuation, natural capital and blue growth concept can be interesting to convince people and convince stakeholders in particular. So actually the natural capital approach is actually, like it is defined, also something that is in line with what are countable denominators for people taking economic decisions. And in this way, it's more easy to make a cost-benefit analysis. For instance, if you have a reduction of agricultural on-land production by 10%, what will be then the increase in production of the related fisheries in the downstream area in the related lake system? So this allows for a basis for more interesting trade-offs that can be made, and where also in activities like blue growth, also new industries can develop to help to achieve this. So you can see there's a natural capital approach as a kind of Trojan horse that hopefully can make a difference in the best possible way for achieving sustainable development. Nevertheless, we have to see that we are already having such kind of concerns for about more than 50 years. I know this date quite well, of the Limits to Growth report, because I was also born in 1972, so I'm 50 years myself. So we should actually, we have been raising these issues already for 50 years, and now it still is in the development on how we can make these tools more accurate, more practical, to make them also being implemented by societies worldwide. So this natural capital perspective is based on the ecosystem services approach, so where you look at actually what support is an ecosystem, like for instance a lake, providing to society, who is making use of it, so who are the stakeholders, what benefits are there for them, directly and indirectly. Direct benefits are, for instance, provisioning ecosystem service, like for instance provisioning of food, like for instance fish, provisioning of fresh water that can be used for drinking, production of wood, for instance, in the corridors of these lakes, and so on. In the meantime, you also have regulating services which have to do, for instance, with the effect of a lake on the climate. So probably it has like a kind of stabilizing effect. Also for flood control, it can be important because you can store the water for some time. In this way, probably also this can lead to lower impacts of these floods or heavy rainfalls on local society. And of course, people like to make use of it in a very different way for recreation, for swimming. They can find it from an aesthetic or spiritual point of view important. So here you see also the diversity of these different services, where you see that the top ones, they are more easy to quantify because in many cases you have also market prices, market values, for instance, how much a fish is costing or per kilogram costing, how much wood or timber has as a value. Where you go to the next one, which is more linked to cost avoidance. So what will be the risk to have a flood in the coming years, and what will be the financial consequence of such a flood? How many houses will be flooded, like we had, for instance, last year, very severely in the southern part of Belgium, so where many houses and even were actually destroyed, and even people got killed. So how much is this costing in the end to society? And this is also an indication if a lake can actually help to reduce this risk or to avoid these costs. What is then the value of this lake? And the lowest ones are more, personal preference, are also harder to quantify. So you see that there's kind of cascade from a physical condition of a lake to the related ecosystem functions. And then these functions can actually have services to people, to society, where the benefits can be then valued. And where actually then you have to find a kind of balance between these different services that are delivered and in what way they are delivered to society. And this way you can get a better idea about the value. Nevertheless, also these methods have some challenges. There's different methods being used, from market prices to damage cost avoidance, replacement cost, willingness to pay. So also what kind of sectors are involved and to what extent they are being, what is their weight in this balance is also leading to potential different outcomes. And so also these new methods where you can put a monetary value on these ecosystems have some challenges linked to data availability, uncertainty, and also market prices that can also change over time and depend on who's actually involved in the price setting. So this is also indicated by Burima, for instance, in the Journal of Applied Ecology, which is also an open access paper. So they are actually having a kind of critical view on this. You have some also people who are against this new method. They claim that in this way you look too much from a human perspective towards ecosystems. And some people go very far in this, that they say this new method is also not the solution. On the contrary, it makes them replaceable. And this is for sure also not the right approach. So you see new solutions to make it more quantifiable, but in the meantime also people who don't believe in it. So it's not the holy grail as such. Therefore, some people have tried to bring it further. They look at the well-being, so not only at the economic aspects, and they consider also elements that cannot be economically quantified, crucial to be part of these trade-off and how to make a balance. So this is also in this report of the Millennium Assessment indicated. So this brings me to the next step from ecosystem service towards sustainable development goals. So where we start from physical conditions, the communities which are in a lake, for instance, how they interact with each other, and what kind of functions they deliver. So this is where we were till the previous part. So now we also make then a link with the sustainable development goals, so which is linked then to food, human health, climate change, and so on. If you want to read more on this, you can also find the open access paper here at the bottom of the slide. So this is from another paper where we have specifically indicated how lakes and reservoirs contribute to each of these sustainable development goals. So, for instance, how they can help to counter poverty, how they help in the zero hunger sustainable development goal, how this linked to human health and well-being, quality of education, and so on. So we see that actually, in the end, lakes contribute to all sustainable development goals, or are at least depending on it. For instance, think about the responsible consumption and production. So, for instance, the harvesting of fish or the release of wastewater from industrial activities should be done in such a way that it's actually not damaging these lakes and their services in the long run. So if you then pick out one specific element like fisheries and aquaculture production in these lakes, you see how these are then specifically linked to these different sustainable development goals. So where it is for sure also challenging to find an optimal balance and also to minimize risk. So you can find here a paper from a chapter of a PhD of Tiptiwa Sampanawit from Thailand. So this brings me to the last part of the nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions will look how ecosystems are functioning and what kind of insights are crucial to protect them and also to restore them in the end. We have to indicate that actually these nature-based solutions are no silver bullet. So you need actually a combination of measures to solve or to tackle all problems in the end, and to guarantee that the different sustainable development goals are also controlled. So a key organization in this respect is the IUCN. So they have been doing a lot of work during the past decennium to make these nature-based solutions more popular and also get them practically applied in different places in the world. So they see them as actions to protect and sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems, like for instance lakes, and that in this way they address societal challenges in an effective way, and it can be adaptive and also simultaneously providing human well-being with biodiversity benefits. So they really seek this balance, like you see at the bottom of the slides, between human well-being and the biodiversity benefits. So in this way they also are on top of these ecosystem services. So they're actually more seeking the balance between the ecosystem service and the biodiversity as such. So to give some examples of key actions, so some key nature-based solutions to protect and restore lakes, some examples are in line related to water quality management or wastewater treatment techniques. So for instance, constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment, waste stabilization ponds for wastewater treatment. Also buffer zones between agricultural land and streams and lakes can be both kind of wetland system, but also can be terrestrial system, can be like small forests, can be flower buffers, or can also be grass buffers. So in our country, for instance, it's very hard to re-implement forest buffers because then farmers have the impression we lost this part for production. So it's more easy to convince them to install flower and grass buffer that they manage themselves. And in this way, they still have the feeling that they have some control on it. Nevertheless, we must admit that they're also less efficient. So, yeah, it's kind of seeking balance between efficiency and also willingness of the stakeholders to implement them. The second example are the improvement and control of habitats. So physical habits are very important for biodiversity, but also for the related services. Think, for instance, about the undeep wetlands in lake systems. They are crucial habitats for reproduction, but for diversity of birds and fish also in general, also for amphibians. And they also help in this way to control the nutrient management. You have this undeep water vegetation that is leading to prevention of algae blooms. So if you want to have very clear water, these habitats, these undeep wetland zones are very critical. And at the level of the communities themselves, you need, of course, to do some stock assessment and limit the harvesting. It can be in time that you have a kind of forbidden period to do some fishing activities. Can be that they claim a certain area for as a protected area where it's not allowed to have some fishing, or it can be based on quantities. For instance, that a limited number of licenses is given, that you have a limitation on gear, how much gear can be used, on how many boats can be in the system, or quota regulation. The last is the most difficult to control. You need a lot of measurements and checks, what is not always easy. So this is for sure also challenging to implement. Another approach is based on food web manipulation, biomanipulation that is called. So where you, for instance, bring in some predators, some top predators to have a positive effect on the clarity of water, or where you systematically remove some species, like for instance, some carp or bream, to keep the water clear, because some species, they are responsible for the upwelling of sediments, and in this way also lead to difficulties for plants to develop. So also prevention of introduction of invasive species is critical, and also in case they get introduced that you're in a very early stage, try to remove these or control these at least. So this can actually lead into a more balanced exploitation and protection of these lakes and related services, like for instance drinking water production, fish production and food production in general. So this brings me to the take-home messages of my class, of my presentation. So the main messages I like to convey that actually there's an evolution of tools to assess lakes, to assess ecosystems in general, from some very narrow water quality and biological composition to economic valuation, and gradually to some more sustainable sustainability assessment. We see also that lakes and ecosystems have very diverse values, and that also diverse set of instruments and visions are needed to convince the diversity of people, stakeholders, and decision makers. So there's not one solution that is able to convince everybody. You have to see what are the interests of different people who decide. Can be both people who buy things originating from lakes or who have an influence on lakes, as well as people who decide about policies and what are laws that will be implemented. So you need other ways to convince these people, other data or other insights. And there's a growing amount of data that is available, and also related to that, the growing insights that are key for a more evidence-based decision support in the future, and probably also more effective mitigation. So in this respect, I think that all the growing insights in these nature by that. So that's it from my side. Have any questions, to contact me later. You can find my contact information on our website, and also here my email is provided. So thank you very much for your interest, and also thank you very much for the organizers for the support during the past weeks for setting up this class.